Thank you all for joining us for this webinar on AWS Landing Zone and what we've been doing for the last year. If you're here, you've probably heard about Landing Zone at some point. You might have read some of our documentation or even launched the solution yourself. And over time, you've been wondering what it is that we've been up to. How does this work? What do we think about as we go through the Landing Zone? And where are we now that we're a year later? And what does that look like? Generally speaking, when we talk to our customers, they want to build fast. They want to focus on what differentiates them. They want to be able to build things that help them achieve outcomes that are suitable for their business or their nonprofit organization or government agency. And we want to move fast. That's a big part of the value of the cloud. How do we get there fast? And how do we reduce that amount of time it takes us to get new ideas and things out to, most importantly, how do we stay secure so that our systems and our data is not exposed and that we're working out there to ensure that everything that we're doing is still compliant and secure while building and helping us move forward. And we want to be scalable. As we build our secure systems, we want to think through the ideas of how do we move forward? How do we go through and have workloads that can grow as we grow as a business? What if you launch that next big idea? How do we get it out there? How do we make sure that it's resilient and meets best practices from that perspective? And as we think through it, we're going to have time and time again where new ideas come on board, where our customers come in with feedback. And that's one of the big values of the cloud in general and AWS is how do we help you as a customer think through your methodology and approach to launch new products and services while being adaptable and flexible to your customers' needs. And AWS enables you to do that in very concrete ways by offering services and products that help you move faster and innovate more quickly and get things out to market with very low price to failure. Meaning I can launch services, I can launch servers, and if I don't really need it anymore, get rid of it and I'm no longer paying for it. But to get started and achieve these goals, there's a number of decisions that we have. How do we configure our environment? How do we think about different accounts and things within AWS in general? How do we configure our users and the isolation that we do within our environment? And of course, how do we establish a security baseline and governance and establish a model that allows us to grow as we move forward? And as more teams and more success is realized, how do we get to the point where we're able to enable the rest of the organization and work through it? So to a certain extent, what we're looking at is what do we do as an organization to move forward in the cloud securely and enable us to achieve our outcomes. So you need a landing zone that's figured, that's secure, that's scalable, that provides that level of isolation, in the case of AWS through accounts. And it's a starting point for those new developments and experimentation, a starting point for migrating applications, and it allows us to iterate and extend over time and provides us that flexibility. And as we start considering these things around our accounts or environment, we start with these baseline requirements, things that we must enable across the board. So for every AWS account, for instance, we want to make sure that our root credentials are secured. We've got MFA in place. Enable CloudTrail so we know what's going on within our accounts. And if something does go wrong, or even just for the purpose of understanding what we're doing and getting analytics and identifying what we're doing. Guard duty to identify security findings. Think about our enterprise roles, our developers, our testers, our architects. What levels of access do they get? And where do we make sure that that access is established and mapped to their roles and permissions? You're more than likely having a process for people joining the company and leaving or changing roles within the organization. So we highly recommend that you federate into the accounts, whether it's through LDAP or an Active Directory of some kind or any other identity provider that you use. This allows you to inherit things like joiners or leavers. Being able to audit the accounts and understand what's going on within them. So if I identify that there's a security group, for instance, that's open to the whole world, we'd like to be able to read that and understand what's going on. And that's established through a cross-account security role that allows us to audit and understand what's going on. And understand and think through the actions and conditions that we want to use to force our governance. Do we want encryption across the board? Do we want to disallow the ability or at least be aware of when an EBS volume is not encrypted within the environment? And we have to think through our network design decisions. What services do I want to launch within the VPC? Are there endpoints for S3, DynamoDB, for example, within my environment? Thinking through my traffic logs and VPC flow logs, DNS, Route 53, there's a number of network considerations that our customers have to think about. And when we start going down that model, we started to recommend best practice that we've seen from our customers over the years and what we've seen to tend to work pretty well. So we start with this idea of a root account, the Organizations Master. Everything rolls up under that account. It's where your billing goes, but it also allows you to establish things like service control policies and understand what you have from an overall view, but also allowing us to view the billing details and know what's going on. And once we've established that, and we have minimal resources, if any, within that account, we start thinking about the environments and things that help support the rest of our company, firm, and agency. We refer to those as our core accounts. They tend to be ones per organization, and they are the accounts that allow us to build the rest of the environment. They are the foundational building blocks. So if you're thinking of a data center example or an application example, it's those primitives that we build, maybe the file system storage that everything else depends on. These are the core accounts that we need. Now, they might look like a single box in here as we go. One would have its own development, QA, prod, and so on, and they're integrated that way. The very first place we want to think about is where do we keep those logs that we talked about earlier, those security logs, CloudTrail, config. We need a place to store them. We need it to be a single source of truth. So we create what we call a log archive account. It's restricted. We enable MFA delete. It's an S3 bucket that stores those logs, and our security logs are going here. It is intended to be an auditable, and we have a very clear line of responsibility around it, and it's owned by whoever is responsible for the security around the organization. And if you notice, there's going to be one theme through all of this. The idea behind the accounts and the separation is a function of the teams and groups that own them and the areas of responsibilities that they have. And you'll see that theme throughout as we talk. Once I've established my log archive account, now I've got a place to store my logs. I start thinking about our security. We need to be able to audit the environments. We need to be able to know what's happening within those accounts. So our security logs still go to the log archive account, but we want to be able to know what's going on. We want to be able to do API calls and understand our security group configurations. So the security account is the place that's owned by the security team to allow us to do this. It can also be our guard duty master. But as you'll find over time, you might want to put that in a separate account in of itself, just simply because you can have findings there, and designate the security account for automated tooling and things that'll go and scan the environments and understand what's happening within them. So we've got a cross account read and write role. The read role is to allow us to go through scans, API calls, understand configurations of things like security groups, what's happening within them, as well as a read-write role that allows us to potentially take actions. For example, deploying a new configuration potentially. Or it could be the break glass scenario if we absolutely must use it. But this is intended to be for automated tooling. There should be another mechanism for enabling access for humans through that environment, through the accounts. This is not intended to be a shortcut to get there. Once we've done that, we start thinking about shared services. Common tooling and things that we'll have, whether it's a directory service that we want or a deployment AMIs that we're going to use across our environment, those machine images that have our golden standards, or scanning for inactive instances. It's the shared infrastructure that we need to help us run our environment. Looks like a single account. This could also be multiple accounts. Some customers choose to create a deployment pipeline as a shared service in its own set of accounts. So think of this as a framework and a mindset around how, again, its logs are going to the log archive from a security log perspective. It is connected to our data center and allows us to have that connectivity, whether it's for directory or for other tools and services on premise. So the green lines indicate the network connectivity. Another area we want to think about, back to the theme of teams, is the network. We likely may have a direct connect or a VPN or even a gateway of some kind, such as transit gateway. You would put that in a networking account. And once again, it's likely to be maintained by a team other than the shared services team, for instance. and its security logs go into the log archive. Once we've established the core accounts and the foundational building blocks, now we're ready to scale out as an organization. We start with our developers. We give them sandboxes, fixed spending limits. They are the innovation place, they are sandboxes, they are disconnected from the data center, and they are a place just to play. Oftentimes, customers will give a fixed spending limit, such as $50 per month, and the developers can go and learn and understand what's happening. And the idea is they become aware of the costs of what it takes to deploy and build things in AWS, but also they have a place to innovate and learn and move forward, and it helps enable more productivity within the organization. And generally speaking, even if a developer goes over, what it does is it allows us to understand what the cost implications are. And we'd rather have those mistakes happen in a known small environment than potentially costing hundreds of thousands of dollars in an environment that is much bigger, that is in production, and allows those things to happen. Once we've taken care of developers, we start thinking of our team. They're based on our level of needed isolation, and we want to match our development lifecycle. Back to the theme that we've spoken about before. These are the teams and groups that have areas of responsibility for a particular product or multiple products. We tend to focus more on the human aspect of it here, as opposed to a single service, for example. This allows us to reduce the chance of somebody accidentally killing another resource. We've seen customers accidentally close accounts. We've seen them delete servers and instances because there's too many people in the accounts. And traditionally, we used to say this was at a BU level, but we found out that many customers have large BUs. So we should think small in this regard. How do we keep these accounts and access level to them small? And we match our development lifecycle. So if you are developing for a dev, alpha, beta, gamma, that's what you match. So we start with development environment for that particular team. Again, security logs are going to log archive. It's connected to possibly our shared services, that's the dev layer, or possibly production because it may have dependencies on a directory service in production. But it is to match our development lifecycle. It's a VPC running within that account that matches our development lifecycle for. Then I've got my pre-prod. Again, that's likely connected to a pre-production network on-prem, if we've got hybrid solutions. It's our staging, it's our testing, and hopefully by this point, we're at automated deployments and scripting to reduce the chance of errors and issues happening as we move forward. Again, we can have multiple stages here depending on how you run your development environment, but it's the framework. It's owned overall by the teams that are responsible. Finally, our production accounts. Again, hopefully we're promoting that from our pre-prod environment. Limited access, it is automated deployments, and that would be connected to our on-premise production network if it's applicable and needed in that scenario. And again, owned by the central team. Some customers may choose to add additional controls around prod, and it's owned by an operational team that is aligned for that particular team. But as customers move toward a DevOps model and automations, they find that this makes sense. But for plenty of customers, this can still be owned by an operation team and working closely with the development teams to make the automation and things in place to allow us to achieve that. And once again, security logs are going to the log archive. It's connected to the appropriate network for the level of privilege that it has. And if we go through all of that, we end up with something that looks very much like this. And this would be a simplified view. So if you imagine each one of the security and log archive accounts, they also have their stages. Our teams look like this. We build what we need within that environment, and ultimately we look at something like this. Looks like this: log archive, security, shared services, our sandboxes, our environments, and there's a team shared services. As we grow over time and we organically think through things, we may identify common resources and things that we do within that environment. It can be overwhelming, and if we start thinking through this approach and model, one of the next questions is, how do I start building this out? Do I go create an organization account? Do I go build scripts and deploy things in place? And beyond that, because we're building an orchestration framework around a set of accounts, we're no longer bound by a single account. Traditionally, an account gives you the highest level of isolation. It is completely separate from every other account. And when I make changes within one account, it doesn't have a cascading impact on others. So how do we start thinking about the QA and staging environment? because I am now affecting a change that happens in one account that has a potential impact on my entire environment. So one area that we also recommend here is a QA or a staging landing zone. It is a smaller version of the bigger landing zone that we've just discussed, but it's intended to be the place where we make tests and we validate what changes we've made and whether they can have an impact on the rest of the organization. So what we recommend is a separate account, a separate landing zone where we test out those changes because we're impacting a much larger scope than we do within a single account. So we recommend that you establish a landing zone that becomes our QA and development environment and have the same code base. I can make my testing within that landing zone, and from there, promote things into that. Now, this, by the way, doesn't mean that my development accounts or my pre-prod accounts are sitting in the development landing zone. They still sit within the production one because those are account level isolations. We're only talking about things that influence the overall orchestration framework as opposed to things that influence within a single account itself. So we expect that QA and landing zone to be relatively small, but have a representative set of accounts that allow us to build and test changes that affect this orchestration framework. So I'll flip it over to Steve Morad, who'll walk us through some possible solutions and ideas to help build and implement those types of practices.
Thank you very much, Sam. My name is Steve Morad, and I'm going to talk about a couple of different options to help achieve or help customers create a landing zone. The first one is the AWS Landing Zone solution, which is an easy to deploy solution that automates the setup to allow you to create a new multi-account environment. It's based on AWS best practices and recommendations. We provide an initial set of security and governance controls. It allows you to baseline accounts and provides an account vending machine, allowing you to create new accounts automatically. And it's also based on an automated deployment. What you get from an automated or from the AWS Landing Zone is it helps you manage your different accounts through a framework that allows you to create and baseline new accounts in a multi-account environment. It provides an initial structure, including a security, audit, and shared service requirements that is common across many different customers. It also provides an account vending machine to make it easy for you to deploy additional accounts using an established set of security baselines and guardrails. We also provide a number of different single sign-on options to federate your either new or existing users across a number of different accounts, and provide cross-account roles to allow for you to more easily manage your accounts in a centralized manner. We provide a number of different accounts that allow you to more easily separate your duties across your different teams and users within your organization, as well as providing a account baseline for AWS config rules, network baseline, and setting up additional monitoring and threat detection tools. And finally, you can easily deploy and extend your landing zone through optional add-ons or creating your own add-ons that you want to deploy with your landing zone. The basic structure includes an organizations account that is responsible for provisioning accounts, as well as providing access to your users, single sign-on access to the rest of your accounts. There's a shared services account that can be used for Active Directory integration, if that's what you want to use for single sign-on, as well as log analytics. There's a log archive account that provides security logs and access logs to provide traceability about what customers, what your users are doing within their different accounts. And then there's a security account that's used for your security organization to provide audit or break glass connections into the rest of your environment. Typically, this would be used for security automation scripts that you use to both audit as well as remediate different activities that occur within your accounts. From an add-on perspective, there are additional add-ons that provide directory connector to allow you to more easily connect your single sign-on environment into existing directories. If you want, we can provision a AWS managed Active Directory deployment or instance for you for managing users within Microsoft Active Directory. There's also a centralized logging solution that you can add on to provide a Kibana-based, Elasticsearch-based view of all of your logs. One of the things that we've learned working with customers with landing zones is to make sure that you create loosely coupled and self-contained configurations for your landing zone. By keeping your configuration autonomous and granular, it allows you to much more easily deploy new updates and new configuration to your landing zone. One of the ways that we allow you to do that is through this add-on capability where you can create loosely coupled and self-contained additions or extensions to your landing zone and easily deploy those independently. Another key component from AWS Landing Zone is a service catalog-based account vending machine, which allows you to create new accounts by requesting them through Service Catalog. It allows you to easily baseline and version your accounts and your account baselines, as well as control who has access to deploy the accounts. By using Service Catalog and launch constraints, we're able to separate the highly privileged provisioning roles from the actual user requesting the account. It allows you to create and update new accounts, apply the baseline configuration to those accounts, create network baselines, as well as apply security control policies for what's allowed to happen within those accounts. AWS Landing Zone implements its configuration and the baseline, both your guardrails as well as your account baselines, through a code pipeline that's very extensible, that allows you to specify within a configuration file or within add-ons how you want your landing zone to look. And then we automatically take that configuration through a number of different phases of a pipeline to validate and build, to deploy different accounts, to deploy all the resources, and then ultimately to provision or baseline your accounts based upon your overarching configuration that you've specified. As Sam mentioned, one of the things that we have noticed and that we've been working with customers is that when you are configuring and when you're building out a landing zone, you really also need to think about your development pipeline and how you go about introducing new baseline changes that you want to make available across your entire environment. One easy way to do this is by creating multiple landing zones, development landing zone. You could even have QA or stage or test additional landing zones, and then ultimately your production landing zone. By having multiple landing zones or multiple development or instances of your landing zone, you can make changes within different configurations for your landing zone. And as you test those and as they successfully go through your development pipeline, you can then start promoting those changes. Out of the box, the configuration is driven through a configuration file and configuration that is zipped up and put in a Amazon S3 bucket. And one fairly easy way to promote changes would be that once you have a known good configuration that's been tested through your development pipeline, you can take that zip file and then you could just move it into your production pipeline and push out those changes into your production environment. However, we also support using a Git repository, either code commit or another Git repository, where you could provide one copy of your source and make your different changes within that source. And then based upon your development processes or your branching system or scheme, you can push your changes from your source repository based on your commits into a development environment. And then once you have validated and verified those changes, you can create and you can then push those changes from that same central repository through different phases of your pipeline. The benefits from AWS Landing Zone is that we've provided a automated install to set up a default configuration that can scale with your business, that you can create different accounts based on your different business needs through a service catalog-based self-service interface that deploys your guardrails to and your baseline to the accounts that get created in a way that allows you to put protections around what your developers can do, but also in an auditable way that you can have traceability, understand what's happening in those accounts. And then finally, as I mentioned, it's flexible. It allows you to specify your own guardrails, your own baselines, your own configurations, depending upon how you want, what is important for your business. From a pricing perspective, there's no additional charge for AWS Landing Zone. You are, though, responsible for the underlying services that are enabled and configured on your behalf. That comes out to around $200 a month for the basic configuration, out-of-the-box configuration. And then the add-ons that are also provided have some additional costs depending on whether you're looking for implementing centralized logging or if you want to use AWS, an AWS managed Active Directory instance for managing your users. As Sam mentioned, though, there are multiple ways that you can go about creating a landing zone, and sorry, I'm going to start on this slide again. As Sam mentioned, there are multiple ways that customers can implement landing zones, and a new service that was recently announced at reInvent last year is AWS Control Tower. AWS Control Tower is currently in preview, and it is a managed AWS service that allows you to create and consistently create a multi-account environment and to manage your accounts. AWS Control Tower provides an automated setup within the AWS console, allows you to, similar to AWS Landing Zone, launch best practice landing zone using AWS vetted and recommended blueprints. Control Tower also provides a number of guardrails that allow you to enforce policies across your accounts. And then it also has a dashboard that allows you to provide oversight to continually view your workload, your workloads in your accounts and how they're in compliance with the policies and controls that you set up. The key features and benefits are very similar to AWS Landing Zone. However, they come in a managed service from AWS. So Control Tower allows you to automatically set up a secure and scalable landing zone. It helps you with managing multiple accounts using AWS Organizations. There's an account provisioning wizard, as well as central logging and multi-account configuration. And then Control Tower also provides a number of best practice guardrails, including both preventative and detective guardrails that you can choose to enable in your accounts. And of course, there's a nice to use dashboard and notifications for seeing overall compliance. The automated landing zone from Control Tower looks very similar to what you've seen in our previous pictures. Control Tower master account is responsible for provisioning activities. It interacts with AWS Organizations to create OUs as well as to create accounts. It also integrates with AWS single sign-on to provide user access to all of your accounts. There's also a pre-configured directory within AWS single sign-on with pre-configured roles to make it a lot easier for you to select what access your customers want to have or your users want to have within your individual accounts, as well as centralized monitoring and alerts using and enabling AWS Config, CloudTrail, and CloudWatch. Similar to the account vending machine and landing zone, Control Tower has an account factory. The account factory is used to create new accounts. It allows you to provision new accounts with different pre-approved account baselines and VPC options. You can, similar to AWS Landing Zone, Control Tower leverages AWS Service Catalog to allow your end users to safely configure and provision new AWS accounts. And finally, these accounts are created underneath the different organizational units that you would request to help you better organize your accounts. And as I mentioned, there's a dashboard for Oversight that allows you to look at your overarching compliance picture within AWS for the guardrails that you've mentioned. You can view your environment different ways by organizational unit or by various accounts or by the individual guardrails. You can see which accounts or which OUs are in compliance or which ones are not in compliance, and drill down to get a better understanding of where your accounts are or are not in compliance with your overarching security policies. In addition to creating a landing zone and starting out with your account baseline and your overarching guardrails, it's important for you to think about how you're going to operate your AWS landing zone. And there's a number of different ways that you can do that, but ultimately you want to combine your operations with your landing zone to make sure that you are introducing changes and you are operating your workloads effectively. You can do that in a number of ways. From a self-managed perspective, you can leverage service catalog as well as your existing or new provisioning processes, automation and operation processes that you're currently using, and as well as a number of different monitoring and logging solutions all by yourself. AWS also has a managed service, AWS AMS, that allows you to that will operate your AWS landing zone and your AWS environments for you. It's available on a month-to-month basis. It allows you to configure AWS services for you through a number of different curated services and management tools that they will bring to help you with by doing the operations for you or helping you with managing your environments, as well as operating and running infrastructure, operations, security, and compliance runbooks on your behalf to make sure that your environment is in a well-managed state. AWS also has a large and very wide number of partners, AWS managed partners, who have gone through our certification program, who can help you with third-party audit requirements and provide end-to-end solutions and services to help you with managing your AWS environments. To get started, if you want to learn more about AWS Control Tower, you can visit the Control Tower product page, aws.amazon.com/Control Tower. And if you want to learn more about AWS Landing Zone, please talk to your account team or visit aws.amazon.com/solutions/AWS Landing Zone. Thank you very much.